It's a privilege to be with all of you. And like you, I also come from a family of educators. My late father was a teacher, and then he became a school principal and then an inspector of schools. And two of my brothers became teachers, and I'm so proud, in particular my one brother who taught maths. And it happens very often that I would talk at a conference or attend a meeting somewhere, and somebody would come up to me and say, "Your brother taught me maths, and he was the best teacher I ever had." I also got to know so many educators and school principals over the past 20 years because I founded a corporate social investment program called Rally to Read in 1998. And what we do is we take reading material to very disadvantaged, deep rural schools. One can almost call them forgotten schools. And unfortunately, and I say it with sadness, there are about 2,500 of those forgotten schools. They have no running water, they have no electricity, some of them have no bathrooms, and some of them have no books. So since 1998, we've taken reading material and provided a teacher training to 1,600 of those schools. And I met the most amazing educators, the most committed. I can entertain you with wonderful, inspirational stories of teachers and school principals out there in the Bundu, and they are doing their absolute best for their learners. So I want to salute all of you, because the work that you do is of critical importance. So, as Nomfuso said, I'm going to have a conversation with you about leadership. It's a subject that I'm very passionate about. And over the years, and in particular also because of my involvement in Rally to Read, I have seen evidence of the difference that effective leadership can make in schools. And obviously, because of the role I play in Partners for Possibility, I've also seen the impact there of quality leadership. So I want to start off by quoting John Maxwell. I'm sure some of you, or all of you, have read of some of John Maxwell's books. In his one book, he starts off by saying, "Everything rises and falls on leadership." So leadership unleashes human advantage. Leadership optimizes motivation and commitment. So I like to use electricity as an analogy when I talk about leadership. And this is the comparison that I want to make. When there's quality leadership, the lights are switched on, and people have direction, and they are motivated and engaged and committed. But unfortunately, the opposite is also true. Where there's poor leadership, followers, figuratively speaking, spend their days in darkness, without hope, demotivated, completely disengaged, and obviously they then deliver very poor results. So what is the current reality in South Africa when it comes to quality of leadership? Can we say with confidence that wherever we go, we just see evidence, compelling evidence of effective leadership? Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to make such a statement. And even in the competitive world of business, never mind state-owned organizers or government or whatever, even in the competitive world of this business, only 8% of employees are fully committed, are totally engaged. Only 8% of employees said in the most recent employee engagement survey that I trust my leader, I respect my leader, I do my absolute best. And a very concerning 46% admitted, almost confessed, that they just do enough to stay out of trouble. Informally, some of them said, my job is like a life sentence, a necessary evil to endure. We have a lot of work to do, whether we are school principals, whether we are business leaders, whether we are political leaders, because the majority of people are disengaged and demotivated. So that then begs the question, what is the desired outcome of effective leadership? So, as Nomfuso alluded to, I lecture at Gibbs, and I posed the same question, and one of the MBA students stood up and said, I'm an effective leader when my people do exactly what I tell them to do. I'm an effective leader when they follow my instructions to the T. And I can see many heads going like this. That is not leadership, that is oppression, that is the tyranny of the boss. So, what does an effective leader achieve, whether you lead a school or a church or a family? If you're an effective leader, then you get people to buy into your vision or your dream. You get them to behave in line with the values you stand for and believe in. But this is the real test. If you're an effective leader, then you get people to the point where they volunteer their intelligence and their energy and their loyalty and their enthusiasm and their contribution. I want to say it again. If you're an effective leader, you get people to the point where they volunteer their intelligence and their energy and their loyalty and their contribution. And what happens then? They accept co-responsibility. You needn't play policeman. You needn't push and pull and threaten and shout, because they do their level best spontaneously. And what happens then? They deliver outstanding results. You see evidence then of syndicated leadership. Then the leader is not alone, because everybody joins hands and helps. Is it easy to get people to that point? It's not. Nomfuso referred to my book. So 14 million books have already been written about management and leadership, and that tells us it's now 14 million and one, because I wrote one. It tells us that people are still looking for answers. So, am I equipped to give this very distinguished audience advice? So, I have grey hair, 45 years in business. At Toyota, I learned a little bit from success. And as Nomfuzo mentioned, at McCarthy, I had the task to try and save a group from bankruptcy. I learned an enormous amount during that period. We had 10,000 employees, 1,100 retail outlets. We owed 8 banks, and this was in the year 2000, 1.5 billion rand. And talking about share prices, the McCarthy share price plummeted from 21 rand to 18 cents. Fortunately, Alan Gray didn't have an investment. It was an enormous challenge. People gave us no chance. But through the grace of God and thanks to the help of some wonderful people, and obviously thanks to an enormous amount of work, over a 3-year period we returned the company to profitability. So I then learned about myself, I learned about my faith, I learned about leadership, I learned about the power of the human spirit. It was a humbling experience, but a very rewarding one. So what I'm sharing with you, I didn't read about in a book. I wrote a book about it. I'm sharing with you what I experienced and what I learned, but more than that, my leadership lessons I'm going to share with you provides you with insight, hopefully, into what I stand for and what I believe in. And it's my hope and my prayer that you will find some of the lessons of value. So lesson number 1, leadership lesson number 1 is a very obvious one. If you can't lead yourself, then it's impossible to lead other people. If you can't lead yourself, then you don't even get out of the starting blocks leading other people. And we don't have a lot of time. Leadership of self is such a fascinating subject on its own. But very quickly, if you want to lead yourself effectively, you need a high level of moral intelligence. You must know what is right and what is wrong, and your moral intelligence informs your conscience. No gray area, right or wrong. You need a high level of emotional intelligence, the ability to understand and control and manage your own emotions, and to have the sensitivity for the emotions of other people. EQ is to strike the right balance between feeling and thinking. If you want to lead yourself effectively, you need a high level of self-discipline to do what you need to do when you have to do it, whether you feel like it or not. And you need perseverance, because this is a tough world. You have to be resilient. You can't afford to give up. Those are just a few quick thoughts about leadership of self. leadership of self is the source of every great achievement. Leadership of self is the bedrock of every extraordinary life. If we take a person like Madiba, he exemplifies quality leadership of self. Second leadership lesson is, if you're a leader, if you want to be an effective leader, you need to have the right mindset. And the right mindset is not to regard leadership as a right, but to regard it as a responsibility. Leadership is much more about responsibility than about privilege. So, some so-called leaders, when they end up in a leadership position, they think they can instruct people to respect them and to trust them. Doesn't work that way. Every day, every minute of the day, the leader has to earn the moral mandate to lead. Third lesson I learned is that leadership has got nothing to do with position or power or authority or self-importance. It has everything to do with influence, and influence has to be earned. And how does one earn influence? By setting the best example 24/7 and by delivering results. Next lesson, and I think this is such an important one for the school principals present here today. There's a big difference between leading people and managing people. And we need to understand those differences and strike the right balance between leading and managing. Because my impression is the majority of teams are overmanaged and underled. So leadership is about faith and people and passion and purpose. Leadership is having the courage, like Madiba had, to go first, to provide direction, to motivate, to inspire, to trust. That is what leadership is all about. And management is very important when it comes to effective execution. It's about planning people's activities, organizing them, coordinating them, and yes, also controlling them. An element of discipline is definitely necessary. So perhaps I can illustrate it by saying leaders create a better tomorrow, managers focus on today. Leaders innovate and change, managers maintain. Leadership is attitude-based, management is skills-based. Leaders inspire and trust, and managers micromanage and control. So, I say again, both disciplines are very important. But the reality is that well-managed people are very regimented in terms of their behavior, that they aren't necessarily motivated. So leadership creates the magic. When it comes to motivation, it's all about leadership. When it comes to effective execution, it's all about management. Next lesson. You can't lead on autopilot or by emulating somebody else. You need to have your own authentic leadership approach. So I can remember when I got my first promotion. It happened long before many of you were born. It happened on the 1st of March 1974. So I couldn't wait to get home to tell Tilly that I was going to become a boss. The head of Toyota's market research division, 11 people in my team, an office, a desk with 2 visitors' chairs, 2 phones, can you believe it, and a secretary. And we were going to be rich, 20 Rand a month increase. So when I walked into my office the next day as a boss, what did I do? I emulated my boss. And I can gossip about him, because he now lives in Australia. He was a real boss. He put the fear of God into us. He intimidated us. He was incredibly important and strict and sometimes unreasonable. Shouted at us, belittled us in front of colleagues. But I realized very soon that I was on the wrong path. Fortunately, a few weeks after I was promoted, we went to Bloemfontein because it was my late mother's birthday. And on the way back from Bloem, I said to Tilly, I've been emulating the wrong leader. And she said, yes. I said, I should emulate my mother. And Tilly said, but your mother has never been in business, your mother didn't go to university, your mother has never had a job, because this is an interesting little side story. My father was 10 years older than my mother, and he taught at her school. And 3 months after she matriculated, they got engaged. So that is why my mother never had a formal job. So why did I from that day emulate my mother? Because she led by example. People follow the right example. Although my father was the undisputed head of the household, my mother was the heart, and she had infinitely more influence than what he had. My mother raised 4 boys without ever raising her voice. And her 4 boys, we did whatever we could because we didn't want to disappoint her. She stood for the right principles and values. She cared very deeply. She served her family and her community. People respond better to love than to fear. So because of my mother, I became a servant leader. Madiba, when he made his speech at his inauguration ceremony, said, I am here not to lead, I am here to serve. This is my personal testimony. This is what I learned over 45 years in business. Before you can ask for a hand, you need to touch a heart. And you can only touch a heart by caring about your people and by being prepared to serve them. And should you care about them, and should you be prepared to serve them, and provided it comes from your heart, your relationship with your people will just move to another level. And again, they will join hands with you. They will volunteer their intelligence and their energy and their contribution and their commitment. When McCarthy was bankrupt, that is the philosophy that I applied. And the incredible things that happened because people spontaneously, the whole of the McCarthy group, from the security guards to the directors, they optimized their contribution. You can be bold without being a bully. You can be firm but fair. You can be rigorous when it comes to results, but not ruthless when it comes to people. And you can be kind without being weak. You can be gentle but fearless. Servant leadership works. It makes an enormous difference to the level of commitment of your people. Next lesson. Ethical leadership is a prerequisite for effective leadership. So integrity is the crucial currency of leadership. So leadership is not about charisma. Leadership is about character. Leadership is not about personality. Leadership is about principles. Leadership is not a way of behaving. It is a way of being. What do you stand for? Do you stand for the truth? If you don't behave as the leader in an ethical manner, and we see it in politics and we see it in the world of business, if you don't behave ethically at all times, you get caught out and you lose all your credibility, all your influence. You are rendered unable to lead. Trust trumps everything. If you lose the trust of your people, you are totally incapable of leading them. Trustworthiness is the key to sustainable, effective leadership. Second last lesson. Leadership is all about achieving results. Leadership is about having the ability to get the job done. Leadership is not defined by attributes. Leadership is defined by results. So effective leaders have mastered the art of execution. Because this is what happens so often. Leaders come with an ambitious vision and fancy plans, and leaders then make unrealistic promises, and they don't deliver, and the promises turn into lies, and they lose their credibility. The cutting edge, the acid test of leadership is delivering the results. Last lesson. Leaders are dealers in hope. Hope is an incredibly powerful instrument that the leader uses to encourage and motivate. Helen Keller, who was both deaf and blind and made such an impact on the world, said, "Hope sees the invisible. Hope feels the intangible, and hope achieves the impossible." That is how powerful hope is. But effective leaders aren't just hopeful. Effective leaders also do hope. Hope is also a verb. We have to do hope. When McCarthy was bankrupt, I had to do hope. I had to provide my people with evidence that I was busy with my executive team doing the right things and achieving success with the recapitalization of the McCarthy Group, the restructuring, the refocusing. But even also at school level, when it comes to motivating educators and learners, we need to give them hope. So as part of the Rally to Read initiative, one weekend a couple of years ago, we were delivering on the Saturday reading material to little schools in Limpopo province. Little schools, forgotten schools, close to the border of Swaziland. And we arrived in our convoy of 4x4s at a little school, primary school called Siakule. 3 classrooms, dilapidated. In fact, the children got taught under a tree. And we arrived there and we received a very warm welcome from the school principal, Mrs. Mlangeni. And I explained to Mrs. Mlangeni what the program was all about and that we wanted to hand over the reading material and explain all about the teacher training. And she just did this. She clapped twice. And about 120 learners knelt down in the dust. And she started talking to them as if we were not there. And she said to them, "I have always told you that you need to have hope. And look at what has happened here today. These rich people from Johannesburg have come with their beautiful cars, and they've brought us priceless gifts, books. And now it's up to us to use those books, because when I look at you, I see little Shakespeares. I see doctors. I see scientists. I see members of Parliament. You should have seen the bright eyes and the broad smiles of those learners at Siakula. It is our task as leaders to give people hope. My time is up, so I want to conclude. I amplified the importance of leadership Years ago I came across a quote that said, "Effective leadership turns weaknesses into strengths, obstacles into stepping stones, despondency into hope." But let me return to the analogy I used right in the beginning to demonstrate the power of leadership when I said I liken it to electricity. So even should you forget everything else I said and just remember this little case study. So some years ago I went to Australia to go and visit the most successful independent motor dealer in Australia, a guy called John Hughes. So John took me on dealer visits. So we visited a number of dealerships, and everywhere we went I saw evidence of very enthusiastic, fully engaged people. I could sense the energy, the rapport between John and his people. The excitement, I could see evidence of the commitment. So that evening over dinner, I said, "John, it's been such an incredibly inspirational experience. Going with you to your businesses and just seeing how people are spontaneously doing their best. So John, as a leader, how do you achieve that?" And John is a man of very few words. He started off as a mechanic or a technician, and gradually over time built up this very successful business. But this is what John said to me. He said, "Brant, I am the light switch every morning. When I walk into my business, I look my people in the eye. I engage them. I involve them. I respect them. I trust them. I do my best to motivate and inspire them. I coach them. I empower them." He said, "Brant, to be frank with you, I just love my people." John has succeeded in striking the right balance between the hard and the soft. I could sense he was leading with a firm hand, but a gentle touch. I could sense that John created a workplace that was different. A workplace where humanity flourished, where people felt appreciated and acknowledged. So, this is our task when we get back to our schools tomorrow or our offices, to be deliberate in our efforts to be the light switch every morning. But obviously, I said leadership is a responsibility. So we will only be the light switch provided we lead and not mislead. We will be the light switch provided we suppress our egos and build our characters. We'll be the light switch should we really care about our people and be prepared to serve them. We'll be the light switch should we prize truth and respect and results and service above position and power and self-importance and self-enrichment. We can only be the light switch provided we stand for the truth, for the affirmation of the good. I want to wish each and every one of you every success with your very important leadership task. Thank you.